Hey team, Adam from Built Beyond 40 here. Alright, today what I want to discuss with you is training to failure and where it fits into the Built Beyond 40 system. Now, training to failure is quite an extreme form of training, okay? And a lot of people don't really have, especially when you're first starting out, you don't really have the experience to push your body to those kind of limits. So, in a nutshell, training to failure essentially just means pushing your body to that point where one more rep, that is to contract in that positive segment of the rep, is no longer possible. So for example, if you're doing a bench press, you get to the bottom of the press and you can't shift that weight anymore. So training to failure really can also be quite dangerous unless you have a really good training partner. In that example, can take the bar up off your chest for you, can spot you. So that's the thing, right? Like if you want to train to failure, you kind of need training partners who are on the same page and who are really good spotters. And from what I've come to see in a lot of gyms, people just aren't great at spotting. They don't really know what kind of pressure to apply to the bar, when to step in, that kind of thing. So training to failure in my system does have its place, but it should be used very sparingly. So then the question is raised, well, if you're not training to failure, particularly in that 100% phase where you're actually looking to add weight and add reps to your lifts, what do you train to? So you've probably heard something about reps in reserve, okay? Having a rep in reserve or 2 reps in reserve. I basically like to train with at least 1 to 2 reps in reserve. Now let me explain what that means. A rep in reserve means that you're finishing the set with like 1 rep left in the tank. So it's almost to failure, okay? Now science has shown that those rep ranges, if you're training very close to failure with a rep or 2 in reserve, they are still very productive. Okay, using the bench press again as an example, let's say, you've got 5, get the 5th rep, you come in for the 6th, and you know that as you're pushing out the 6th, if someone put a gun to your head and were like, I need 1 more rep, you could get it, but you leave it alone. Okay, so that's what having a rep in reserve means. Now, the advantages of training with a rep or 2 in reserve means that you're not stressing out your system too much. So you're not having to recover as severely from a workout, especially when you're in that 100+ bracket, okay? When you're training like flat out and you're just looking to add reps and weight to your lifts, you can kind of extend that segment of your training, sometimes up to a week, if you leave reps in reserve. What I've also found is by training the majority of that strength cycle with reps in reserve, you're actually able to, I think, and it's not just a thought, I have the data to prove it, but I think you're able to finish, that last week where you should push, okay? So let me qualify. There is a place for training to failure, and I like to do it that last week of my strength cycle before I gear down and go back to the deload, before I go back to either a week off or go into the 60%, 70, 80% segment of the cycle. Those last few workouts, those last couple of workouts in that block is where I'll go, is where I'll push. Because I know that on the back end of those workouts, I'm not having to gear up another week at 100% plus. I'm actually gearing down into that easy part of my strength cycle. Okay, so that's where I tend to want to do it. And then, of course, there are movements that really don't lend themselves to training to failure. For example, if you're doing deadlifts, training to absolute failure on a deadlift or a barbell squat, could really be detrimental and not very safe. So if you are employing those movements in your workouts, then it's a really good idea when you're doing, unless you sort of go in for a 1 rep max at the very end, which as a newbie or someone who's kind of just finding their feet with deadlifting and squatting or those type of movement patterns, I kind of recommend that you don't, train all out on those movements like that. Complete failure. Like I said, they're dangerous and not necessary to do it. So you are kind of building up that gaining momentum. You are building up with that rep in reserve. Okay, so you build up with that rep in reserve, you create a lot of momentum. So in that last week of your cycle, you can just hit it. You can go all out and just test and see where you're at strength-wise. Push until you hit failure. And it's really a good idea to do it with a training partner or someone that you trust in the gym that can spot you. You just communicate. You basically have to say, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to train to failure on this set of bench presses. I need you to spot me. And when I can't move the bar, which will become very self-evident, that's when I need you to give me a hand up. Force reps, rest pause, drop sets, all those things actually do have their place in training as well. But I would leave them more for the intermediate to advanced lifters. If you're just starting out on this journey, then you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff yet. All right, so training with a rep or 2 in reserve, that is not going all out to failure. It's safe. And again, the benefit is I think it leads you into a much better final, into a better finale on that end of your strength cycle. Because you're not taxing the nervous system as much. You're not building up too much systemic fatigue. You'll find it easier to recover between workouts. Because if you imagine having a 2 or 3 week training block where you're at 100% and every single one of those workouts you're just hammering hard and training to failure, you're going to be very sore. You're going to find it very hard to recover. And unless your nutrition and your recovery and sleep is right on point, you probably won't get a very long stretch in that region, the 100% plus. You might even, I've had it, where I've burnt myself out after just a week. I've hit my previous maxes, then come in, and the next week, after that week's done, I'm burnt out. I have to deload again. All right, so I hope that shed a little bit of light on this whole training to failure thing. It's not 100% necessary. I think it has its place. It's just like any other tool in your toolbox, but you really got to be experienced with it and know when to use it. All right, guys, until I see you again, take care.